I feel we have much in common. And certainly we have great commonality in this Blue Ridge Parkway, which transgresses both of our states. It's been a wonderful achievement that has taken place these past 50 years. I'm pleased to be on the platform today with my longtime friend Franklin Roosevelt. As he mentioned, we have been friends for many, many years. His father and my father have been given a great deal of credit for the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I think they deserve it. Of course, many others participated too. But since those two have been given the credit, I'm not going to say that Senator Byrd Sr. doesn't deserve the credit. I'm sure that Franklin's not going to say that President Roosevelt doesn't deserve the credit. They both do. You know, those two individuals were rugged individuals, independent-minded, you might say unreconstructed rebels. They didn't agree on everything, but one thing they did agree on was the outdoors, was nature, was the need for national parks, and this Blue Ridge Parkway. In mentioning President Roosevelt, I want to say this. This parkway is a great achievement, and it would never have been accomplished without him. But in my judgment, the number one achievement of the Roosevelt administrations, of which there were four, was the enactment of the Social Security program, which I think is more important to more people than any other program of the federal government. I've seen many and shaken hands with many today who were in the worked in the CCC camps of 50 years ago. Many park rangers who've now retired. Of course, many park rangers who are on duty I've had the opportunity to see in the last 2 days. And I want to pay tribute to them. I think the National Park Service is one of the finest organizations that we have in our country. Senator Byrd Sr., who served quite a while in the United States Senate, was so intrigued by the National Park Service that I think that he would have resigned his Senate seat if he could have been appointed director of the national parks. I think maybe the reason he didn't do that, he wasn't certain whether President Roosevelt would appoint him to that position. I heard a wonderful tribute paid to the National Park Service and the rangers, the personnel. This goes back 30 years. Senator Byrd Sr., Governor Tuck, and myself drove from Mountain Lake to Cumberland Gap to dedicate that national park there. That's quite a long trip. And in the dedication speech, Senator Byrd Sr., who the newspapers say was rather frugal with taxpayers' funds, he said this about the National Park Service. He said it's the only part of government that gives $1.10 worth of work and energy and ability for every dollar that they are paid. Yeah. I might say that didn't go over too well with the Secretary of the Interior who was there that day. He sought me out, and he said, "Harry, can't you get your father to stop saying that?" He said, "I'm having enough trouble with my National Park Director, Conrad Worth. He's always wanting more and more money, and the more your father encourages him, the more money I've got to give him." Well, there's money for a good cause. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be with you. It's great to be with this distinguished group on the platform. I appreciate being invited, and I say to each of you, all of us must get together for the 100th celebration of this Parkway.
Senator Byrd, we appreciate your being here today, and we thank you for your great efforts, past and present, on behalf of the Blue Ridge Parkway. And I suspect Bill Mott, hearing those testimonies today, may want to hire you to help him out on his budget. I've already mentioned briefly the successful partnership between the federal government and the state government of North Carolina and Virginia. If you had to single out one key factor in the miracle of the Blue Ridge Parkway, it would have to be this cooperative relationship with these two states. The partnership was formed at a unique time in our history and probably would be difficult to duplicate in today's world. But it remains strong and vital, and it is just as important today and to the future as it was 50 years ago when we embarked on this great dream. We are very fortunate to have with us today the governors of these two great states, and we will hear from them now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Honorable Charles S. Robb.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. I'm delighted to be with you and my good colleague and friend, Governor Jim Martin of North Carolina. He and I were both attending a meeting of the Southern Governors Association until the wee hours of this morning, and we left about as far away as you can get from down in far southern Florida in Miami. We both arrived back in our state capitals at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, something this morning, but we wanted to be here. We wanted to be here with you, Gary, and with the former superintendents of the Parkway and all the members of the Park Service, and particularly to be here with Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Byrd and so many others who represent what this celebration is all about. It's pretty exciting. You know, I was reminded of it when I landed just a little while ago over at Galax International that some of you are familiar with over in the Hillsville area. Some of you probably know one of the state troopers there, Trooper Campbell, who met us when we came over before we got in those fancy cars that Ted and some of his family had provided for us for this particular occasion. And he said, "You know, this is a very special day for me too, because my father worked on this as a landscape engineer, and so many others have had a part in this success story. And Jim Martin and I get a chance to represent our respective states now in celebrating 50 years of cooperation and success." Now, Franklin Roosevelt made reference to the fact that it helps our travel industry, and indeed it does. And with Pat McMahon here, we appreciate the fact that travel is up. And for us in Virginia, it's over a $4 billion annual industry with over 91,000 people employed because of it. But we're here to celebrate a lot more than that today. We're here to celebrate the cooperation between levels of government, all working together cooperatively to do something that very few would have thought possible under any circumstances, particularly this difficult period in our history. I think Gary was the one that made reference to the fact that we can use half of it. These were the worst of times. Well, for those of us who didn't experience them directly, having read about them and talked to many who lived through that period of time, it was a real challenge. And this represented a commitment to the continuation not only of the natural bounty that all of us praised, but it also was a continuation of the human spirit. And it was a success story. And it helped, as both Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Byrd and others have talked about, to have all this chemistry come together, and these two fine visionary leaders, and so many others who have been a part of this success story, ongoing success story throughout. But it means that our natural beauty will be preserved, that we believe that our cultural heritage in this region of the country is important, and that we're willing to work hard together to see that we perpetuate it for those who come after us. And that's a pretty nice reason to have a celebration. So to all of you who have participated in one way or another, and some of you do go back 50 years today to this little spot of land here on Cumberland Knob or elsewhere throughout the almost 500 miles of the Blue Ridge Parkway, congratulations and a happy birthday for a very successful and important 50 years for all of us who are the beneficiaries of your dedication and hard work and caring. And for all of you for permitting Virginia to participate on this side of the line, Governor Martin, a very special and sincere thank you.
Thank you, Governor Rob. Now we will call on our host governor for today by virtue of the fact that we are about a half a mile from the state line. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Governor of North Carolina, the Honorable James G. Martin.
Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Governor Rob, I will say to you that not only did Dottie and I enjoy that visit with the Southern Governors Association with you and Linda this past weekend and early part of this week, but ever since I was there to welcome you to Virginia this morning when you came in for assembling to drive over here, and as we reached this site and broke into line to get a bit of barbecue and enjoyed visiting with our mutual constituents and folks from all over our great land, I've had a splendid day with you and look forward to many more of the same. Senator Byrd, Congressman Roosevelt, wasn't it wonderful, ladies and gentlemen, to see among ourselves and each other the way in which their messages evoked the memory of their fathers and the work that they gave, just as they themselves have been a part of the leadership of our great country. We welcome you. We welcome you here to North Carolina. Many of you are aware, those from North Carolina and Virginia certainly, that through the years of our history there have been these calumnies, these friendly slanders of a sort that have floated back and forth across the state line among friends. After all, it's written in Scripture, whom the Lord loveth, he first chastiseth. And so we've had those kind of commentaries against one another. But it's fortunate that we're here today celebrating one of the ties that binds. We've become partners through projects such as the one we celebrate here today, which help tie together our shared natural and regional resources just as we share a regional heritage from colonial times. We're gathered at the historic spot where the construction of the Parkway began. It's a place where the dream was realized, where a monumental project first breathed life and became at last the success story that it is today. Blue Ridge Parkway, from that first swing of the pick and shovel in 1935, has accomplished two very diverse feats. It opened these once remote mountains for the enjoyment of all Americans and visitors to our great land, while at the same time conserving the scenery, the natural and historic landmarks and wildlife of this area. Now one of the most heavily visited of our national parks, with nearly 20 million visitors last year, the Parkway has become one of our nation's most prized natural and cultural resources. But perhaps more important is its role in preserving and protecting that immense natural beauty of the region and the rich heritage of the Southern Appalachian people, which has been on display and shared with us here this day. Living here now are descendants of those hardy souls who settled here in the 1700s, conquering its soil, surviving the harsh winters, and fending for themselves in the mountain coves. From their lofty perch, They tended to view the rest of the world as mere flatlanders who had an easy time of it after all. They were proud folk, these mountain people, and they had a right to be. And they still have a right to be proud of what they've accomplished and of their heritage. I suppose when the idea of a parkway was first proposed in the 1930s, it would not have been surprising if many of these mountain folk had resisted every step of the way. The government, after all, wanted to construct nearly 500 miles of roadway through their front yard, through this entire region. But thanks to what must have been extraordinary tactful negotiating, and I met today Mr. Gibbs, who was one of those who helped to line up the rights of way. He and other agents of North Carolina and Virginia and the United States government were able to convince the mountain people of the worth of the project to them and to future generations, to us. They not only then became supporters of the Parkway project, but many of those residents provided the bulk of the labor force during its construction. Looking over what's been accomplished with the Parkway these past 50 years, it's staggering, really, to imagine the combination of that creative force, imagination, and vision that made what we now have into reality. Might not be able to do this today, but that we now have this great resource will forever be attributed in everlasting credit for those who brought their abilities to bear on the project and never gave up or lost sight of their goals. I would add a special reference to the compelling persuasion provided by the late Josephus Daniels of North Carolina, who, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt Sr.'s former boss at the Navy Department, had great influence with the president. This parkway, the world's first motorway designed specifically for leisure travel and recreational use, has since become a model for other parkways throughout the world. So its value is impossible to estimate. At the very least, it offers us an opportunity to escape the toils of everyday lives. And at the very best, its views, its vistas, lift the spirit and refresh our minds today and beyond. So as Governor of North Carolina, I'm proud that the Blue Ridge Parkway is partly located in our great state, and that it forever ties us with our sister Commonwealth, after all, from which North Carolina was originally derived. And so on behalf of all North Carolinians, I want to honor and recognize those statesmen, laborers, mountain people, Park Service employees, all those who gave to these states, to this nation, to the world, this priceless national treasure. 2 years from now, when the final link in the chain will be forged with the completion of the Parkway system near Grandfather Mountain, I hope that we will be able to meet again and celebrate that event. So until then, happy 50th birthday, Blue Ridge Parkway, and heartfelt congratulations to all those who had a hand in your birth and your continuing value to us today.
Thank you, Governor Martin, for being with us today. Both governors mentioned, and I'd like to say again that we appreciate their taking the time out from the Southern Governors Conference, which was in Miami, and flying long hours last night to be with us for this ceremony. And we deeply appreciate their attendance. And just as a little token, as a reminder of this day, I want to present each one of them one of these memorial commemorative books, The Blue Ridge Parkway, the First 50 Years, and I'd like to present one to Governor Robb and Governor Martin. Our next speaker has also traveled a great distance. A few short months ago, the administration was searching for a new director of the National Park Service. It had to be a person with vast knowledge and experience as a park professional, a person who could carry on the traditions of those great directors of the past, men like Stephen Mather and Horace Albright. They found such a person in William Penn Mott Jr., who is known worldwide for his skills and innovations in park management. Interestingly, Bill Mott began his Park Service career as a landscape architect for the National Park Service in San Francisco. The year was 1933, the same year of the birth of the idea of the Blue Ridge Parkway. He later went on to a distinguished career as the director of the California State Park System, the president of the California State Park Foundation, and as the general manager of parks in Oakland, California. I've come to know Bill Mott as a man of ideas, a man of wisdom, and a man of great enthusiasm. It is now my pleasure to introduce a park man for all seasons, the director of the National Park Service, Bill Mott.
Governor Martin, Governor Robb, Senator Byrd, and Congressman Roosevelt, Regional Director Baker, Superintendent Eberhard, former Superintendents Weems, Riles, and Brown, special guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be with you this afternoon to participate in this grand occasion, marking the 50th anniversary of the Blue Ridge Parkway. President Reagan and the Secretary of the Interior, Don Hodel, asked me to convey their best wishes to you and to express their regret that they could not be here to take part in this significant event. The celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Blue Ridge Parkway. As Gary said, I began my career with the National Park Service in 1933, the year that the Blue Ridge Parkway was conceived. And as a landscape architect, I have been attending with a great deal of interest and pride a series of celebrations that have been so skillfully and beautifully arranged. A dream has come true. Well, what gives me a sense of personal pride is that this remarkable achievement was the product of men and women of my era. People who thought creatively, who took action, who solved problems, who built something lasting. And I'd like to mention to you that one of the attributes of the National Park System and the 337 units that make up the system is that they represent stability. Today, most of our great American cities will be rebuilt in the next 100 years. Pardon me. People are moving from one place to another. But within the National Park System and its 337 units, there is stability. The Blue Ridge Parkway will be here the next 25 years, the next 50 years, the next 100 years. And so will Yosemite, pardon me, Yosemite and Grand Canyon. When I took the job as director of the Park Service about 4 months ago, I tried to communicate some of this pioneer spirit to our present employees. I came up with what I called a 12-point plan, a set of goals that I felt should be our guiding principles for managing the National Park System. In one of those 12 points, I tried to encourage our employees to think creatively, to look at problems as opportunities that challenge our best efforts. I can think of nothing that illustrates this philosophy better than the story of the Blue Ridge Parkway and how it began. During the 1930s, our country faced enormous, almost overwhelming problems as a result of the Depression. And nowhere was the suffering more severe than in the already isolated rural sections of the nation, such as southern Appalachia. And how did the national leaders of that period respond? What went through the minds of President Roosevelt, Secretary Ickes, Senator Byrd, and the other leaders in Congress who were implored by the people to do something? Well, we all know how they responded. They came up with some creative ideas. They took a problem and turned it into an opportunity. They created hundreds of civilian Conservation Corps camps in state parks all over the country. They put hungry men to work on great public works projects like the Hoover Dam. But more important to this gathering, they embraced an idea for a scenic road linking two national parks, Shenandoah and Great Smoky Mountains. Now, 50 years later, the American public is enjoying the fruits of that creative thinking that led to the construction of the Blue Ridge Parkway. Just reflect for a moment on all the benefits from that one good idea. It brought jobs to hungry people. It expanded the horizon of the hardy but isolated mountain people. It planted the seeds of economic growth in an area where there was little hope. It projected a unique environment that otherwise might have been lost to greed and exploitation. And it brought pleasure to the millions of visitors who have come here to enjoy the scenery and recreation and refresh their spirits. Today, we face a different world. The Blue Ridge Parkway probably couldn't be built in today's economy, and it's a cinch that we'd never be able to write an environmental impact statement. Though some things that with the end of the construction era, our job will be finished. We're really just beginning a new and perhaps more complex phase as we move into the future. We just can't complete the remaining sections of the Parkway, put a fence around it, and sit back in a caretaker's role. It's not that easy. In fact, the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead over the next 50 years represents the opposite side of the coin from the first half century of the Parkway's life. Where there was little development 50 years ago, we are witnessing an explosion of growth from the movement to the south and to the Sun Belt. This thin green line that we know as the Blue Ridge Parkway will continue to be squeezed on all sides. Where once there were few tourists, we now have an abundance of them. Perhaps more than 20